Controlled Chaos here. I want to talk to you guys about my first year experience in testing Stars Reach, the sci-fi MMORPG that is a sandbox MMO and has a lot of simulation to it. Let's go ahead and get started. So when I first got into the test, it's very bare bones. It had the combat, had the moving, it had climbing, and some crafting in it, but everything was very bare bones, and it was cool to see. I played around with some of the more unique features of the game, such as the terrain manipulation was the big thing. Seeing how they can change the terrain that way, plus also seeing that you could burn the ground, you could morph the ground, and terraform it in changing the type of ground that was there, such as, sand to limestone or glass by heating it up, things like that. It was really cool to see and experience. And I was, I'm there to be a tester, and they're wanting to make sure that the game works and the mechanics that they have in so far works. And I'm used to that kind of thing because I've been testing games since Star Wars Galaxies and PlanetSide. I got into the early tests of those, and I got used to that. And then in around 2010, I actually became a professional game tester. So when I first got into the game, it was very fun. But after a while, it started feeling more like my testing job of, okay, I'm here to actually test things. I want to test this, I want to test that type of stuff to help them make the game better, because I like the overall idea of what the developers of Stars Reach are trying to do. What really surprised me with this is how quickly they're putting in updates. And it's like every 2 to 3 weeks they're putting in an update. And these updates aren't just to fix bugs with the parts that are in the game, but adding in new capabilities, such as adding in homesteads. When we got the chance to build homesteads, was really fun, and that wasn't driven by the developers. The developers gave us very basic tools, but the community really came alive because we built our own city. They didn't even have the government system in play. And this was like, a month after me being in the test that they started doing homesteads and stuff like that. And people were building space stations out in space. They were building on the ground and just stuff like that. The big thing that really caught even the developers off guard was how the community came together and we built a city on one of the planets. And we had a lot of fun with it. The most memorable part was we wanted to put this fountain, just this structure that looked like a fountain, in the town square of this town that we were building. Well, Raph Costner's in the game with us and says, hey, I can summon up and put water into the fountain for you guys. That way it actually has water in it, because we don't have the capability to move water around that way. And when he did this, apparently when we had built the fountain, we didn't fully short up with the blocks, and there was a gap in the blocks. So the water seeped out and ended up flooding and turning the dirt into mud. The developers aren't doing this. This is all gameplay mechanics server side then being fed to us, which are running the client side of things. And I thought that this was amazing. This was funny because now the buildings we had built that were on ground floors or had basements were now getting covered in mud, and we had to gunk out and shore up our buildings to get this mud out. And it was a learning experience, but something that really they're not going to change, because it's something you have to sort of make sure that you have everything set up correctly and you don't have gaps in what you're making to put in water. It's supposed to simulate real life, which is what they're wanting to do. And I really liked that was the first feel that we got as a community to see that in fact. And it was fun to see and interesting. And that really grabbed my attention. And I really started to feel hopes for this because I'm used to playing games like No Man's Sky, where you manipulate the terrain, you put a building in, you have a basement, and you come back a couple of days later, maybe even weeks later, and all of a sudden that basement area is covered with the terrain, no matter what. And it was sort of like, okay, there's no point in No Man's Skies in building a basement. But in Stars Reach, if you block everything out and you have it secured correctly, you can make yourself a basement and it function correctly and work correctly. And I really like that effect because the terrain doesn't repopulate itself. You have to actually do something to put that terrain back, whether it's dropping tailings in or things like that for mining that would cause your basement area that you built up to be overcome with dirt, or once again, as mentioned with the mud thing, not having everything put in. You can put in all the bricks and leave one little brick area open to where terrain can flow in, and it will flow in. And, you know, depending on the terrain, if it's rock, it's not going to flow in. But if it's like sand, it's going to flow in quickly. If it's dirt, it's going to flow in a little bit slower. But it was nice to see that kind of feel. And as they progressed, they started adding in more and more mechanics, such as adding in seasons and the event system that they put in was really amazing and fun to see. And they had sped up the seasons to where it would change every 4 or 5 minutes, so we could see the cycle of the seasons. And it was cool watching the seasons change because, well, it wasn't like every 4 or 5 minutes, but it was like every half an hour it changed, things like that. But it was cool to sit there and watch the seasons go from it being winter to then spring and then into summer and then into fall, where the leaves would start falling and things would turn gray, or not gray, but brown and stuff like that. And then it'd go into winter where everything would go white and you'd still have these leafless trees where you just see the branches. And in spring, the branches would start getting leaves and flowers branching on, coming off of them again and stuff like that. And just seeing that cycle was really cool. What was really amazing to me is the events. I'm used to when an MMO says that there's an event, it's a static area, just like in Warhammer Online. There would be these events, but they were always the same place, the same mob, and it would be on a countdown timer. So you'd finish the event, and then like 15 minutes later, that same event would happen again. Well, you get really tired of that kind of thing happening. That doesn't happen with Stars Reach, especially when they first put it in, because when they put it in, it's got a group of events. It could be four different types of asteroid hitting the ground. It can be a bunch of different mobs hitting the ground. It could be an alien invasions where aliens would come in from outer space and land on the ground and start attacking things and stuff like that. Was really, really cool. And I really liked that, because they especially had this one that was a giant asteroid, and we would land, it would create a crater and put a bunch of resources into the ground that we could mine up and gather. And that's the other thing I've always stated, and I'll continue stating, is the mining in this game for me is fun. I don't like hitting those nodes to get the resources. I like to actually dig into the ground and find those resources. I find very enjoyable, and Stars Reach does that. So I enjoy mining in Stars Reach. And even from the get-go, I enjoyed it. But with this whole entire giant meteor thing and adding in new resources really made me excited even more for how that worked, because of that factor. And the fact that when you're digging through rock and all of a sudden you hit dirt, it's going to collapse in on you slowly, or you hit sand, it collapses in really quickly on you, is very fun and has risks to it of getting buried in that stuff. And I liked it a lot. So that event was fun and interesting, but they continued going on excuse me. They continued going on with things and adding in more things. They, over time, when they added in the ability to actually craft things correctly. So it's no longer, oh, you're just given these things. These resources now have stats to them of the PQRV stats, and they add in the ability to sort of, okay, we have these resources with stats. Now use these resources to build your item. Was fun because we were given originally really good items, but then they took those really good items away and gave us very low end, lowest quality possible items and made things a drag with those items, to where now we want to go and craft these better items, because mobs don't drop items, they drop resources. We use those resources to create items, along with harvesting items from the trees, digging into the ground and stuff like that. And so now we had a reason to craft, and I started getting into crafting and really enjoying crafting, and that got fun there. And really, I really started getting into the crafting and seeing the direction that was going. But then my thought was, well, you know, how are we going to trade this and stuff like that? And then they added in the ability to trade. We could do secure trading. I was like, okay, cool. This is getting the starting foundations. I'm really starting to like this. And then they had to do a world reset because the giant asteroids, the players, and the mobs were destroying the environment so much that it was hard to move around, and the worlds were looking really terrible, because at this time there was no way to sort of nicely take your tailings and fill up an area and it would turn in and evolve into what was around it. Just sort of like what happens when you mine. You take those tailings, you put in, you recover, and nature will naturally turn those tailings and you know, it slowly turns into dirt or whatever is in the area. And I was sort of feeling, okay, this is sort of bad. And so they turned off the creatures destroying the environment, the asteroids destroying the environment. And I was sort of like, oh, that's a bummer, because I really liked the effects of that, and that they would drop the resources in there and leave a mark in the world. You know, not only were players leaving a mark in the world by digging up areas, but the creatures and the asteroid stars were leaving marks in the world, and it made things really unique in that aspect. And so that's the one bummer that I didn't like, was that they turned off. But I can understand the reason why they turned that off, because they had to do a whole entire world resets to bring back fresh new worlds for us to dig in, because we were running out of resources. We were running out of areas to dig. It was really hard to get around in the world because there were all these pop marks and just badly dug up ground and nothing really put in there, because when you were dropping the tailings, it would drop it in blocks. It wasn't until after later on they added in and called it slurry, where it would sort of just mush down. It acted sort of like mud would act, you know, and it would just sort of blood down. But at that point, it still wasn't turning it into the natural nature. It was still staying what it was and going that direction. But, you know, they need to still add other stuff in. They didn't want to just stay with, okay, we got this in, let's shore this up and complete this. It's okay, we got the basis of this in, but we got these other features that we need to add in that aren't even in the game. And to me, I think that's really smart, to go and add in a small chunk of the features that they want, and then move on, add in another small chunk of another feature, and so on and so forth, is really sort of nice. Just like, you know, we had the basics of combat. We had like 3 weapons to choose from, and later on they gave us 3 new weapons. And, you know, later on they added in vendors so that we didn't have to do the communication in game of, hey, I'm selling this, or I need this, who can make this for me. They now put in vendors, that allow sellers just to put the item up into the store. But first they had to get the in-game currency in there. And in order to get the in-game currencies, they had to put basic missions, and just seeing how things evolved, especially with the mobs, because when I originally started playing the game, all the mobs were white. There were like about 20 different mobs in there. It got very monotonous after a while, very generic, bland. But they didn't update with the mobs, where they took those 20 mobs and they made variants of those mobs to give out a total of 120 different mobs. But not only did they do that, they added in a level of difficulties to and varied the mobs. So sometimes you could run across one mob of a type and it would be white. Another time you'd run across that same type of mob and it will now be yellow or orange or red or purple, and that determined the difficulty. The higher up in the colors it went, with purple being the worst, the harder it got. And that caused, once again, the community to come together and say, hey, I'm seeing this purple mob over here. Who wants to help me take this out? Or a boss, who wants to help me take out this boss? And we would all glam together and go out there and fight that one mob. Made it very fun and interesting. And I found myself, every time they were doing an update, spending more time playing the game, because there's more features, and it didn't feel like I was, testing as much. Yes, I was still testing and I was still reporting bugs, but it didn't feel, as things continued to press on, that it was ho-hum, boring type of things. There was new things to play around with, new things to explore and stuff like that. When they put in the newest update, the GovBot, I found that, I normally play about 2 hours, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to take a break. I ended up playing 4 hours before I realized the time I need to go out and do something. I was only planning on playing 2 hours and then go out and do that errand I need to run. Instead, I wasted 4 hours and went, oh crap, I messed up my own schedule and stuff like that because of the new gameplay mechanics that the GovBot put in, and trying to get points in the whole entire government system to see if I could possibly get mayor. Did that happen? No, but it was fun in doing that. New types of missions put in to do that was really fun. And now that we got all of this new stuff in, we got the crafting, and they took the crafting even a step further that I really like. It's now to the point that it was like, about 2 months ago from the day of the recording of this, they put in that when you do crafting, it's not you get the resources, you craft items. It's no, you get the resources, you craft subcomponents like a grip for the weapon, a barrel for the weapon, an optics lens for the laser for the weapon, and things like that. And then you take those components and put them together. And they did it really smart. And the way I like it is the resources have those stat values. And when you combine those resources together to make that subcomponent, it creates a new set of stat values based off of the values of the different resources that you put in. And then when you combine those components together to create the final product, it takes those stat points from those different things and gives you the final stat points for your weapon. So every weapon has different stat points. Unless you're using the same, like you have a big bulk of the same resources for everything, and you build those subcomponents with those same resources, those subcomponents are all going to have the same stat values, then you combine those together, then yes, you can have a weapon with all this, a bunch of weapons with the same stat values. But that's a lot of resources, a lot of time put in, and stuff like that. That makes it very interesting. The other thing that I liked was the constant changes that they were making to the environment, especially for mining. They went from basic mining, okay, it's easy, it's simple and stuff like that, to okay, we're now going to add in adhesion. And when they add in adhesion, it basically meant this is how soft something is, this is how hard something is. So when we're mining something that was soft, it would mine up really quickly. But if you mine up something that's a hard resource like granite or diamond, it was slower. But on top of that, with the rocks, we'd normally build out these big cavernous areas and dig them out and have no fear of it collapsing on us. With the adhesion, it added in the chance that when we were digging out those big areas of rock to get to the resources and create these big caverns, that can collapse in on us and bury us alive, adding more risk, which to me add more fun because you had to shore up these areas. And naturally, they had created these big caves and big chasms in the ground naturally that they had to shore up themselves due to the new adhesion. And I liked the way that they did because it's not just a bunch of pillars. It was walls and create sort of a labyrinth feel, and I could just imagine that when you got a creature in there and you're trying to run away, you get to a dead end, that creature now has you blocked, you have to memorize your way through there. And I got lost so many times with this new adhesion system and the maze that they had randomly created, and trying to find my way back out of the cave. That normally would just be a straight shot. Easy straight shot. I knew exactly where I was going. Now with this adhesion, I have this labyrinth to deal with and figure my way out and try and memorize where I took a right turn, where I took a left turn was very nice. And the fact that these plants are randomly generated, the first time you play through, you're not going to know your way through. And if you dig through some of those labyrinth areas, you have to be careful because if you take out too many of those labyrinth walls, that ceiling's going to collapse on you. So you have to think strategically about that. And I really liked that effect. I love that feel when it was added in and just enjoyed it. I love the fact that the developers are jumping in and talking to us at different points in times. And I'm not just talking, the regular developers, like every so often an artist will jump in and talk with us. Every so often, a lot of times we had Rodney to talk to, but like Dave Jordanson would jump in and watch us and talk with us. Raph Cosner will jump in, talk with us, and we can ask them questions. How does this work? Or what's the plans for the future of this? Or what are your thoughts on this? And they would take our feedback and work with it. And that's the next thing I want to talk about is them taking our feedback. They were planning on releasing farming. And they had this whole entire plan set up of farming, and they were just getting ready to put in farming and unlock the farming skill for us to play around with. But that got held off for months and months. And the reason being is there's a guild in the game. And it's not an official guild because there's no guild system in the game yet. It's just a group of players come together and decide to name themselves Gunk, which is a preservation guild. They want to preserve planets and make these beautiful farms and stuff like that. And, and they've been doing that with the whole entire thing when homesteading was playing and being able to plant and stuff like that. They were doing that, and the developers were seeing what Gunk and the players were doing with the very basis of farming. There's like, well, wait a second, they're doing exactly what we're thinking here of what we want to do with farming. We need to create and make farming a lot better. And so they held off on fully in implementing farming because the players were doing such amazing things that shocked the developers that they wanted to improve farming. And I really like that the developers are doing that. I like the fact that they're seeing what the players are doing and they're going, ooh, this gives us an idea to improve this and make this more fun, more interesting, way of doing things. And I like that. I don't like the fact that they took away some things like, the creatures and the asteroids creating the craters and morphing the environment. But at the time, I can see why. I think now that they have the GovBot in and the political system and the zoning and stuff like that, I think it'd be okay for them to bring in the creatures doing damage to the environment and manipulating the environment with creating the craters and fires and stuff like that. Bring that back in. And the reason being is it's not just the GovBot political system, but the fact that now when you drop off your tailings, it does that pool morphing thing. But then it also, with this GovBot update, it also adds in that slurry of tailings will slowly morph into the terrain around it. So I can just imagine that if an asteroid lands and it deposits a bunch of like gems and metals and stuff like that, that when we dump tailings on top of it, it will morph in and add in more gems and more metals and stuff like that. And we can create a whole entire new mountain. Would be very interesting. I think that if they are planning on bringing that back, they may be holding off to where the asteroids do a bit of damage to buildings and stuff like that. Although that might upset players. I don't know where they are. I'll have to, in an interview, I'll have to talk about what the plans are for that when I interview some of the developers. But I'd like to see that destructive environment from the game come back of the asteroids and stuff like that, because players now have a reason to keep that pristine, because the system also with the ecology kiosks and the GovBot together, it's going to sit there and say, hey, the planet's short on this. You need to fix this problem or the servitors and makers are going to get upset. And it gives a reason for the players to make it look nice. Plus, the players naturally want to make the cities that they built look nice and stay nice. You don't want to spend all that time creating this nice looking city, let an asteroid hit a street, and then just go, oh, we'll leave it alone. No, they're going to go in, they're going to fill up that crater hole, and they're going to repave the area and stuff like that. It's just human nature to do that. And the fact that also they got the ability just put in of the plans of the less used planet, or the planet that's been eaten up the most, but no one's really sticking around and building cities in, but just grabbing resources from it. Okay, that planet's gonna go away and a new planet's gonna take its place. They have that in play. I think with that gameplay mechanic will really add to it, with forcing players to utilize the tailings and fixing up the damage that the game's environment does to it because of that fact. Because you're not going to govern this planet and build out this really nice planet to just let go to the wayside and then the server shut down and all of a sudden everything on that planet disappears. Players would quickly learn, okay, we don't want that to happen again. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that the environmental damage that happens from the creatures or the asteroids gets repaired. And so that's the reason I think that should come back. Overall, I really love my time playing in Stars Reach in this year of playing. I'm finding myself playing more and enjoying it more every time they do an update. I'm playing more, I'm enjoying more. It's not feeling as harsh as being a tester and you're forced to just look at the interface all the time and test bugs with the interface, not doing any of the fun stuff. I've had to do that as a game tester. There's several times where it's been, okay, we need you to do this, and it's just boring, monotonous stuff. In Stars Reach, there's so much stuff in there now that makes it interesting and fun, and especially with the roadmap coming out, I'm even more encouraged by this game and what they have planned. And the fact that the other thing I really like that the developers did with their roadmap is they didn't set dates to when things are going to happen. They just put it in the things of, okay, this has already been done. We got this complete. Here's what the players are testing. Here's what we're testing internally. Here's what we're working on. Here's what's coming up next. And here's what's long term. No actual dates set to it. And they've stated that they could end up moving things around because, in all honesty, in game development, that ends up happening. You run into a problem with the system that you were planning on putting into the game. It needs a little bit more time to be worked out, so it gets pushed back some. And their roadmap allows them, the way they've designed the roadmap allows them to move things around. And the same goes in reverse of things can be going really smoother than they expected to where it could get pushed forward in the queue and show up in the next update. But then again, they're planning these updates around a specific theme to work on specific things. Such as when they had the vendor update, it was mainly around the vendors. When they put in the GovBot update, it was about the GovBots. When they put in the Wild Wormhole update, it was about the Wild Wormhole tech and procedurally generated planets and working all that tech out. And so I think they'll probably, they may hold back something that's done to fit into the right test slot that fits with everything that one thing that got done early is. And that's fine with me. I'm fine with that. I've seen that in testing and development of games. It's the smarter way of doing things. But overall, like I said, I love what I'm seeing. I'm excited for the future of this game. And if you're interested in the game and the sounds of this game, of you being able to manipulate the environment, you having a reason to actually craft, and there are a reason to being crafting and stuff like that, go to their website. I have the link in the description down below. Even sign up for their beta, join their discords, get a chance to talk to the players and see some of the gameplay because they do stream on the discords. It's very fun, friendly community and very open and accepting of people. I want to thank you guys all for watching, and YouTube will think you will like this video next.